Hello, this video is an account of my visit to the Fauld Crater in Staffordshire in June 2020. It isn't really meant to be yet another retelling of an already well documented story of the explosion. However, it would be remiss of me not to provide a bit of background, and if you want to find out more, details of some of the better books on the subject can be found in the description. Gypsum mines driven into the escarpment overlooking the valley of the River Dove were being used by the RAF during the Second World War as a munitions store or bomb dump, with thousands of tons of high explosive ordnance stored underground. On Monday the 27th November 1944, around 4,000 tons of high explosive, barely a fifth of the amount stored there at the time, detonated with devastating results, including the loss of 70 lives, military underground and civilian above. As the memorial on the rim of the crater makes clear, the site is the final resting place of the 18 victims whose mortal remains were unrecoverable. It is also home to a significant number of unexploded bombs which couldn't be retrieved. The site remains the property of the Ministry of Defence and, for obvious reasons, access to anything but the perimeter is neither possible nor permitted. It took many years following the explosion for nature to reassert herself. I remember visiting in the late 1970s and the sides of the crater remained barely covered with any greenery at all. These images are from 2004 and the difference now is striking. The tree growth means that the ugly scar on the landscape has now largely been masked, from the ground at least. It's only from the air that the scale of the crater becomes apparent, and this after a great deal of work to reinstate the surrounding farmland and over 70 years of weathering has softened the edges. The crater also marks the site of Upper Castle Hayes Farm, every single tangible piece of which, along with its occupants, simply ceased to exist at 11:13 AM that Monday morning. The farmer and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Goodwin, had just set off along the long driveway down to the main road for a trip into Burton-on-Trent, when their car was overwhelmed and engulfed by a tidal wave of water and mud from a small reservoir above them. Workers in the nearby Peter Ford's plasterworks suffered the same fate. The small village of Hanbury, just 3/4 of a mile from the crater, suffered very badly, both in terms of the physical damage and the emotional toll. The closest building was the pub, the Cock Inn, which was so badly damaged it had to be demolished and rebuilt. So too was the village hall, and its replacement, the Hanbury Memorial Hall, is just one of several memorials to victims in the area. Gypsum mining has taken place here for centuries, and even by the 1940s the extent of the tunnels and caverns below ground were mind-boggling. Whilst the RAF had taken over a substantial part of the mine for their bomb dump, Peter Ford's company continued to actively extract gypsum from a separate part of the mine, walled off from the RAF area. Several of Ford's men were killed underground by the blast or overcome by toxic fumes released by the exploding bombs, while others were able to escape via this emergency shaft, now securely sealed off. After the explosion, the gypsum mine was reinstated and continues in operation today, the workings now extending many miles underground. The RAF held a court of inquiry into the explosion and were fortunate to have a surviving eyewitness, allowing the cause of the explosion to be identified with a high degree of certainty. 2 airmen had been removing composite explosive from the fuse pocket of a 1,000-pound bomb, with several others nearby. The witness, Armourer Corporal Lionel Poynton, told the inquiry that these men were using a hammer with a brass chisel. A spark from a brass chisel will apparently cause composite explosive to detonate very easily. Poynton warned them of the danger only a few minutes before the blast. By sheer luck, in those few minutes he had moved to a point sufficiently shielded from the blast to make it out of the mine alive. The inquiry, perhaps inevitably given the wartime conditions, also discovered a shocking lack of oversight by the chain of command at the base. The crater will always be there, a memorial to those 70 souls in the wrong place at the wrong time, But as time goes by, nature is ensuring it is becoming harder and harder to discern the terrible scale of what happened on that fateful Monday morning. I hope you've enjoyed this tour, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.